Hi kids, Miss Feld here. You are looking at my laptop screen right now. So what I'm doing right now, I'm recording on the screen of my laptop so that you are sitting here looking at my computer as if you were sitting in my seat holding my computer. The reason that I'm doing this today with you, and I'll be doing more of these hopefully soon, is because I've had a lot of students who have asked me about digital illustrations. Now, as you know, before I started teaching, I told you guys that I used to be a graphic designer. Graphic designers work in computers. We make computer art, digital art. We use big fancy programs to try and make these big fancy illustrations, okay? But sometimes it can be as simple as MS Paint or a piece of paper that is scanned into a scanner and then put into Photoshop or some other program. I'm saying Photoshop now because that's actually what I used for the illustration that I'm going to be showing you today. Now, if you want to start to try to do digital illustrations, you don't need a program like Photoshop in order to start. I said MS Paint a few minutes ago. If you have access to a computer, you can use something like that. If you have a tablet, if you have a phone, if someone you know has a phone, you can always download these little free drawing apps that will give you the feeling of drawing on a computer and not drawing on an actual piece of paper. And getting your hand and your brain comfortable with making digital illustrations can only help you. Practice is always good. Discovering is always good. So I'm going to walk you through this Photoshop drawing that I made. Here's the finished product. Okay, we'll look at the finished one first, and then I'll break it down and show you layer by layer or piece by piece how I did this. I call this illustration The Girl in the Woods, and it's pretty obvious why. This is a little girl, or she looks like a little girl, but she's got strange antennae sticking up out of her head that are glowing and little tiny orbs above her head. And she is walking into what looks like a pretty dark forest, although there is a light, a very mysterious light shining somewhere deep in those woods. And she doesn't look really afraid at all, does she? Now, I don't know who in the world this little girl is supposed to be. I don't know if she's supposed to be some kind of an alien or a little mini monster or just a girl who's wearing a fun Halloween costume. All I know is that I saw this in my head and my imagination dreamed this up and I decided that I wanted to draw it. And that's really all you need when you want to start making art, is an imagination and your hand. Okay? So, to start you off very, very quickly, I'm going to try and go through this. I'm going to turn off all these layers on the side. When you're in a program called Photoshop, which is this one right here, you're going to get the option to put each of your lines on different layers. And you can turn some of them on and turn some of them off at different times throughout the art. Okay? It's really, really helpful when you're trying to do stuff like this and you're trying to work with all of these layers. Now, I'm going to go from the bottom to the top. My very bottom layer inside of this painting is just a color. I painted my canvas green. Okay? I wanted it to be green because I feel like that would help for the forest feel in this piece. The next layer I used a paintbrush from over here on this menu. This is where all my pencils, tools, erasers, and paintbrushes are on this side over here. And I painted some texture onto the green forest because I figured just having smooth green was probably not as good as if I had some textured green. Then I added the dark shadows that are part of the forest, and you can see that I left space right here for where I'm going to put that mysterious light. But the shadows are also reaching out toward this walkway that's going to be here because they're stretching out from the dark, dark trees. Now, I have another shadow that I put on top of it just to make this one a little darker. And it's pretty subtle, but I think it just makes it extra dark feeling. Now, my next layer that I started to sketch out the walkway that the little girl is walking on. It's not it's still pretty sketchy and kind of messy looking, but as you know, when we draw the little girl later, she's going to cover up a lot of this. And also, I haven't added any of the detailing or outlines to this walkway. Now, my next layer is going to be adding texture to the walkway. Again, we don't want to just have a smooth blob of color because that's not quite as realistic as what I want my painting to be. And I feel like anytime you're doing a painting or an illustration, adding some texture to it is usually a good idea. The next layer above that one, it's very subtle. It's kind of hard to see back here, but I'm going to show you. I want you to watch this little area. I'm adding grass. I'm using zigzag and wavy and diagonal lines all over the place to add a grass texture. Now I don't need to add that grass all over the place. I just added it in some areas to try and give the viewer a feeling of this being grassy. Okay? The next layer that I added was the walkway. So I added some extra shadows around these bottom parts in the corner just to make it feel like the whole picture was a little bit framed, sort of. And I also added heavier outlines around the walkway. I'm trying to do a style that is both outlines, like heavy cartoon outlines, but also shadows and shading and light. I'm trying to combine different art techniques to create an original look that only I have ever seen in my own head. So the next layer, the most important part of this painting in my opinion, well, second to the girl with the antenna, is the light behind the trees, because this is the other character in my painting. The first character in my painting is the little girl who's coming up later, but this mysterious light is the next thing that you're supposed to look at and wonder about, because I'm pretty sure, in my head at least, this is the object or the light that the little girl is walking towards. She's not just walking into the dark forest. I think she's walking in there to go find out what that light is. Now, I started to add trees after this, which are just long, long, skinny lines. I wanted them to look tall and tall, skinny, skinny, almost like spider legs. Could be creepy, but I think that it still leans itself toward looking magical. Now there's some trees in there, and some of them are dark, some of them are lighter. This one's kind of fading into the background, so is that one back there. When I add more trees, some of them I made solid. Some I had branches. Some of them are reflecting some of that mysterious light in the background, which means that these are closer to the little girl. Now these go back into the distance and kind of fade into the fog. And it gives you a feeling that this forest goes on and on and on, back further and further into space. It gives the picture a lot of depth. Okay? The next thing that I am going to show you, the next layer, is the light in front. These are the light rays that are shining through the trees and calling toward the little girl, beckoning her over. Okay? And she's very, very curious and wants to go check it out. This right here, this layer is called body color. So basically I painted this and I put it all on one layer together. And she doesn't have outlines around her right now, which is why her arms and everything look a little bit lumpy. Because I think I did the black line first and then I colored it in afterward. But I'm showing it to you bottom to top. So this is showing up first. Now, there's the black outline. And it kind of makes her stick out a little bit more from her background. Now it does make her look a little more cartoony than she would look if she didn't have an outline around her. But I really don't mind the cartoony look because I like trying to blend different styles of illustration into one piece. I like exploring different techniques. Now I drew, you can see that she's missing one big part of her, which is her entire head, and I drew that separately because of the glowing that I put on top of it. So here is her hair and her head, and you can see that at the top she's got this very bright, very pretty glowing hair, and you can see the strands along the side that fade, fade, fade to dark back here because there's a light source somewhere up here. But where is that light source that's making all these little orbs dance around her head? Oh, there they are. These glowing antennae are like little spotlights, and that is why the top of her head is the brightest point. Remember when we talked about 3D objects and value, there being a sphere. You look for the light source, then the highlight, and slowly the object fades into shadow until there's a spot where there's no light at all, which the antennae are not shining down here, which is why this part of her hair is the darkest. I really love making the hair look like it's all flying everywhere and kind of floating around her head on its own. It gives it a really mystical, magical, windy, sort of whimsical feeling. I really like that added detail. Okay? Which I think changes the picture completely. Now we're going to look at it one more time. That's my finished product, the girl in the woods. I didn't even mention that she's got this little glowing stick or wand or something, but you can see the reflection here and also on these trees over here as she's walking into the woods. Okay? So, that is one Photoshop drawing with Mrs. Felt. As I continue to do digital drawings, I'll put little tutorials online maybe with some of these, how to do different digital illustrations. Sometimes I will do a time-lapse video of myself drawing one of these. I have a lot of fun practicing with this. It helps me learn a lot about digital illustrations. I love practicing computer art. I love practicing painting, drawing, you name it. I like stretching all of those muscles. I'm so proud of you guys. As always, I want you to practice, practice, practice. When we practice, we discover new things about art that we would have never known if we had not been pushing ourselves. I want you to practice. I want you to show me whatever you're practicing. I'm so happy when you're pushing yourself and growing as an artist, okay? I'll see you at school.